everyone. It's 10 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started, although more people may trickle in. My name is Kim. I am the director of the Cobb Law Library, and we have Danny Alexander Burke and Andrew Smith. Yes, it's a win for the day. I remember two names. Here representing Lambda Legal and to share information on legal processes for various issues that name changes, birth certificates, social security, survivors benefits, all kinds of good stuff. The law library, if you've never been here before, we are open to the public. We sell forms for things like name change and kind of point people in the direction of finding legal resources. And Judge Schuster would like to say something. Come on up.
Yes, thank you for inviting us. And I appreciate Lambda Legal doing this.
Fantastic.
So for years, Cobb County has had this reputation of not being friendly to people who are different than what we perceive. It all started in '96 when they had the big brouhaha over the Olympics. But the bench has gone out of its way in the last number of years to try to change that perception. To let people know that this courthouse is open to everybody. So we're glad you're here today. Before the law changed in the Supreme Court, we were doing same-sex adoptions, but we had to do them quietly under the radar, but we were in fact doing them. There were about half the judges were happy to do them. We were glad to do them. When the law changed, I was actually chief judge, and we opened up that day to do the first same-sex marriages in the atrium of this building. And we didn't know the reception that we were going to get, but I will tell you that our probate judge issued the licenses like that, and our magistrate judge that afternoon, and since that day has done all the marriages, no hiccups, no problems. And you know, when we did the first ones on that day, again, we didn't know what kind of reception we were going to have. Yet we had courthouse employees lining up on the second floor and just clapping that we were there. I say that because and now the big thing that we're doing is we're doing name changes. We had one yesterday. We usually have in presiding week 2 or 3. We're happy to do them. We're happy to help anybody on their journey. We're happy to make this an open and welcome courthouse. This justice system in Cobb County should not be one that you are nervous about or afraid about. We would rather you settle your legal issues in this building than somewhere else. There is one little thing that applies to all couples, and that is artificial reproduction technologies. And that is where you essentially hire a carrier to carry your baby. A lot of those are done in Fulton County because you have to go through a lot of hoops to get the birth certificate and stuff, and it just works out better being where the birth certificates are issued by the state of Georgia. So with artificial reproductive technologies, we call it ART, sometimes Fulton County's the better place because it's easier to get all the documents. But we do them, but sometimes Fulton's better. So with that, I don't want to take away from your seminar, but I just want everybody to know you're always welcome in this courthouse, and we always want to help you with any legal issues that you have. So before she goes on, anything you want to ask the judge? Any questions? Come on, it's your opportunity. We'll play Stump the Judge here. Anything? Come on, you got to have something. No? We've got a shy group today. Charlie?
I'm sorry, Judge. I would like to ask a question, but you have been so thorough and complete that I am just left in awe, and there's nothing else to cover.
He's got a fee application in front of him. Seriously, things that pop in mind are adoptions, marriages, which are done mostly by magistrate court on a walk-in basis, name changes. Tell me, in y'all's experience, what are some other issues? Yes, ma'am.
What about those that want to change their name but also want to change the sex on their
Oh, we do that. Yeah, it's just on a petition.
And we
Then
will
your
talk
fight is
about.
with somebody else. Okay. So what I hear anecdotally is, let's say you change your name. I'm James Stephen. Let's say I changed it to Stephanie. The driver's license people can get their arms around that. But what if I change the name to, give me a name, Chris? Sometimes they don't. So if on the order you present to me, you put something to the effect that James Stephen is now Jennifer Stephanie and identifies as a woman, I'm happy to do that. If you put, I now identify non-binary, I'm happy to do that too. But with your agencies, you may have issues, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
So those are things you need to be concerned about. But you can't put too much in an order. We'll sign anything you give us. Okay, and it's better
good
to
to
cover
know,
everything.
good to know.
It's like a bad analogy. You're at
I feel
Chick-fil-A,
like we
you don't
should
know whether you
test
want
that.
mayonnaise
Well.
or mustard, you just take them both. Put everything in the order.
I'm done with name.
But I think there are issues with some of the agencies.
Thank you.
Oh, that's my signal to go away.
We may be answering some of your questions as we go
Yeah,
on.
they know this stuff better than I do.
Yeah.
We're just open arms.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen.
Very much appreciated. Good morning, everyone. My name is Danny Alexander Burke, they, them, theirs pronouns. I have with me today Andrew Smith, he, him. I am here from the Southern Regional Office of Lambda Legal. We were founded in 1973, so actually next year is our 50th anniversary, and we've been here in Atlanta for 25 years this year. We are the oldest and largest legal nonprofit dedicated to LGBTQ folks as well as those impacted by HIV and AIDS. We do that through three main avenues: impact litigation, education, such as today's workshop, and public policy work. We have a couple different branches across the country: Atlanta, Dallas, oh boy, LA, Chicago, New York, and then DC. It's always a quiz. But no matter where you are in the country, we have a help desk phone number for you, and I'll talk about that as we continue on today, so that all of our American citizens, as well as some of our folks abroad who are looking to become American citizens, have support around LGBTQ and HIV/AIDS impacted situations. We are a nonprofit. We do not charge our clients, and I'll talk more about how clients come to us and some of the questions that they have when they come to us, but no one is charged for Lambda Legal's services, which I think is always a very important thing for folks to know when they want to get in contact with us. A couple highlights about Lambda, some of our notable cases here. I won't read them all to you. We're surrounded by law books, so I'm sure if you want to do some reading, you know where to go. But I do want to highlight that some of this work has happened in Georgia. Georgia specifically has contributed a lot to the protections that LGBTQ and HIV/AIDS impacted folks enjoy, as it relates to privacy, as it relates to employment, as it relates to healthcare. And of course, all of those things we are continuously working on. We are finding ourselves in positions where we really have to step our game up and be ready. But we are here to take on that task. To do this work, often when a client calls our help desk or they reach out to myself as the regional program coordinator directly, I will put them in contact with one of our attorneys. Sometimes that's a Lambda attorney, or sometimes it will be a cooperating attorney, which is where my friend Andrew comes in here. We have attorneys as well as other well-connected folks around the Atlanta area who support our work through donations. As I said, no client is ever charged. They support us through volunteer committees in different capacities, which Andrew also does, but we also have cooperating attorneys. So sometimes we can't take on the case, but we still want to make sure that you have that legal support. So we'll partner with organizations like the ACLU, Trevor Project, Transgender Law Center, and many, many others, as well as local attorneys. So firms like Greenberg will do a lot of great work with us. And because of that work that they do, I invited Andrew here today to talk about his firsthand work with name changes and gender marker changes. Before Andrew talks a little bit, I do want to highlight some things about Lambda here in Georgia. In Decatur, we supported a family who were looking to make sure that their new daughter, who had been born in London, was treated as an American citizen. She had American citizen parents, so she herself should have been an American citizen. That was something we had to go to court about because at the time, the federal administration did not think that she should be considered an American citizen, even though both of her parents were one naturalized and one American born. We ended up winning that case as well as another case, so that now children of same-sex couples are immediately born American citizens if one or both parents are also American citizens, regardless of place of birth, as well as those children are entitled to any survivorship benefits or any inheritance that may be coming from abroad as well. Jamaica Evans was one of our employment cases. All of the names that are underlined are links, so when this presentation goes out, feel free to explore through some of our cases. Our help desk receives over 4,000 calls a year. That number might actually be a little low. We, as I said, have regional phone numbers, but it all goes to a centralized location where we then disseminate out to attorneys, disseminate out to case managers that we work with in other states, things of that nature to make sure that people are receiving as much specialized support as we can provide. Our policy work, of course, as I said, we are up against some difficulties. So anti-trans bills that we may be seeing, things around healthcare that we may be seeing, we are doing all we can to organize around those things and make sure folks are supported. And the community outreach that we do, as well as corporate and firm outreach, because we also want to make sure that as you are reaching out to attorneys, they also have access to knowledge and to the ability to continue their education so they can provide good quality advice, and that's coming from an informed and empathetic place. So we see the benefit in going out into the community, but also to make sure that the practitioners themselves are receiving that support. I will hand it over to Andrew to get into some of the name changes, but thank you all for your attention so far. I know this is the introduction stuff.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Andrew Smith. I'm an attorney at the law firm Greenberg Traurig. I do a lot of work with Lambda, and so when Danny asked me to come talk to you all about name changes and some of the related casework, I gladly agreed to come join you all. I'm by trade a commercial litigator, so I mostly represent banks and pharmaceutical companies, but a lot of my pro bono work is focused on helping folks in Georgia get gender and legal name changes for adults. And so something that I've done many times, including in this courthouse, and so this is meant to be interactive, and so if you guys have questions while we're going through some of the stuff, please ask. I won't profess to know everything, but if I happen to know the answer, I'm happy to try to give you what information I have about it. I wanted to start a little bit in talking about federal ID name changes, because it's actually easier to get done in some respects, particularly as it relates to gender markers. So one of the really nice things about some of the work that this administration has done at the national level is they've made the ability to get your gender marker changed on your passport pretty simple. You can actually change your gender marker to even X, so non-binary folks at the national level. In terms of paperwork, a lot of it is actually just the existing paperwork that you go on and you fill out to get your passport. But you do need one sort of additional piece, which is a letter. So you need to have some information from a physician that just says that you've completed gender affirming surgery. But that's pretty much the only piece that needs to be added in. It lasts for 10 years, and you basically can do it fairly straightforward. Danny's laid out here pretty simply. 10 years, state-issued birth certificate showing that there's been, I'm zooming in. Smart TVs. A state-issued birth certificate, a court order recognizing the correct gender, and a signed letter from a provider. some things that you should note about the letter that you need to get from your physician. It needs to have your name, your legal name, and whether or not that's been changed, the date in which you received your surgery, or whatever your gender-affirming transition was, and you need to also include your date of birth. You want to include as many markers to indicate authenticity of the person. So honestly, if you Google like sample letter, they're pretty easy to come across online. So if you're looking for a resource or a sample, Google is a good place to actually start on for some of those. Questions about federal ID name changes? We're just really focused on passports, but yes.
So I have one. I know we're in Georgia, but
Yep.
a lot of us move right now. We're not from this state originally.
Yep.
Is it harder being here if you need to change stuff, for instance, North Carolina?
So are you talking specifically about like your birth certificate, for example?
Well, that's one of the, yes, the state,
Yeah.
the state issued birth certificate, like that's one thing.
That's a great
So
question.
if you're dealing with a different state,
Sure. So another state will recognize your an order from a court in Georgia changing your name. A couple things to note about that. You probably should talk to a local lawyer for one reason. Sometimes a state will require really certain language to be included in an order. And to the judge's point, you want to make sure that that information is included. I typically submit, when we do a proposed name or gender change, a proposed order to the court, which includes as much information as possible about about what I want on there. If you're going to North Carolina, you're going to want to check North Carolina's rules about what has to be included in that court order, but they will honor it. So in the same way that like your driver's license can be used right in another state, not necessarily for residency purposes, but to like drive on the roads, they will honor an order from a Georgia court modifying your birth certificate. So you can do that all here. And we're going to talk a little bit about, there's kind of 3 different things you can do. You can change your name, you can change your gender, or you can change your name and gender in a petition in Georgia. So there's sort of 3 different things you want to petition the court for, or 3 different ways to do that. Good question.
Yes, definitely. And I believe it's linked in this presentation, maybe in a couple slides, but transgender equality as well as Lambda Legal, we both have state-by-state guides to what those birth certificate requirements are, what the language specifically says, because as the point has been made, some states are very explicit about what's required, and some, the language, there's maybe some room to interpret. So.
Yeah, in Georgia, you just need to have the order say that the Office of Vitals and Records is ordered to change the name from X to Y, and that this is the appropriate gender for the birth certificate. And to do that, and we'll talk a bit more about Georgia, Georgia's rules are a little more difficult in terms of what's required to get your gender marker changed. Want to go to the next slide for me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So driver's licenses. And actually, in terms of processes for getting things changed, and I should have started here, if you're going to be changing your driver's license and your social security card, the first thing you should do is petition the court to get your name changed. The next thing you should do is get your social security card changed, and the last thing you should do is your driver's license. So when I talk with folks that are looking to do all 3 processes, you should do them in that order. Because the driver's license is going to want your social security card to reflect your new name. So for Georgia driver's license, first thing I noted, first you want to go to the Social Security Administration and have your name changed with the SSN. There's forms online. It typically can take 8 to 10 weeks to get done. So if you're looking to do some international travel, for example, maybe something you want to get in front of. Of course, you need a court order certifying that your name could be changed, and you must go to the Georgia Department of DMV within 60 days of getting that court order. So if you wait too long, you're going to have to go get the court to reissue an order, and you've sort of missed your window to go get that work done. In order to update your gender marker in Georgia, you do have to have a court order or a physician's letter certifying that your gender has changed. And the letter of order has to state the name, the date of birth, the date of the gender reassignment, and other identifying information. One thing I'll note in Georgia, what constitutes gender affirming changes is not defined. There's no like laundry list of these are the surgeries that constitute work that has been done to do gender affirming changes. I'll tell you some common ones. Top surgery. So if you've removed your breast, for example, that counts. A hysterectomy, if you've had bottom surgery. Those types of acts can constitute what the law will likely consider is, I'm not a physician, surgery that constitutes the work for gender affirming, and you do need a letter from your physician. It does not have to be the physician that actually did the surgery, just a physician that's familiar with the processes and the medical work that you did. Any questions on that? I know I'm jumping around, it's a lot of info. Yes.
I've noticed on the e-filing system where they require or they offer a redacting system.
Okay.
Is this information something that would be considered something that you would redact on a public record, or is that just up to the person that's filing it?
That's not information that you can redact. And so there's
Okay.
pretty particular rules about
Okay.
what can and can't be redacted for name changes. That's one of the things you can't. And part of the reason is, and this is a little draconian, is that part of the reason that information goes into a publisher's affidavit is so that creditors, banks, other entities are looking, they can scan it and look for someone who might be committing identity theft.
Okay.
And so it's a mechanism for creditors primarily to go in and track and watch. These companies have systems that scan that information to make sure that that's one of the only ways that you can get denied a name change, is if you're doing it for some illicit purpose, which is to avoid a debt or to sort of obscure the law.
So you can't even request to file it under seal?
That information would not be,
That makes sense.
it would not be something that the court would grant to be filed under seal. There's pretty particular rules about that, and to get something filed under seal, you actually have to have a hearing in the state of Georgia. So it's a pretty difficult process to get something filed under seal in the state of Georgia. Great questions.
Yeah.
So birth certificate changes. So typically, to actually get your birth certificate changed, you have to go to the issuing state. But, as I mentioned before, you can use an order from the state of Georgia to get that done. So this has the specific rule for Georgia. So it's upon receipt of a certified copy of a court order, and we'll talk about certified copies, indicating the sex of the individual born in that state has been changed by a searchable procedure. Then you can go and ask the Office of Vitals and Records in the state of Georgia to have that information changed. The new birth certificate will be marked as new, not amended. And this talks a little bit about top surgery. That should meet the requirements. It typically does. In the cases that I've worked on, I've never had any issues with folks that had top surgery. And by the way, we're going to circulate this to the folks that are here. So if you're wanting to have some of this information at your hands, we're going to send it to the folks that are all present. And to apply for amended birth certificate, you should include some stuff. So you should have an affidavit of amendment. All these forms are online.
Yes.
And I know your question, I'll get to it in one moment. A certified copy of a court order, a medical certification from a physician's office, a copy of a valid government-issued ID, and then a money order. I think it's $35 to change your name, or to get your birth certificate amended. And you had a question, I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I wondered, you said in order of name change, social security card, driver's license, where would the birth certificate fall in that?
So I typically have folks do their birth certificate right after the social security card. So if I'm telling them sort of chronologically, court order, SSN, birth certificate, driver's license.
And on the affidavit of amendment, is that for specifically gender marker, or is that also for a name change?
Both.
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 Okay.
So if you're changing your name or your gender marker, you always need the affidavit. What you're doing is you're essentially attesting to that the information that you're providing is accurate. It's like basically taking an oath that what I'm saying is truthful, it's valid, and you're doing it under penalty of perjury. That's what an affidavit is doing. Yes?
So if we need to change the birth certificate in another state, in this case specifically Alabama,
You need to look at Alabama's rules. I'm not particularly familiar with how they do that. I only do them in Georgia. But I think Danny mentioned this, if you go onto Lambda's website, they have links that are state specific, and they can walk you through the particular processes for Alabama or California or North Carolina, Texas. Every state's gonna have some different rules about what's required.
I was told, I don't know if it's true, that we have to get a court order in Georgia and then take that to that
That's
state.
probably the best way to do that, but here's the reason why. Most states will not change your name unless you've resided in that place for a certain number of months. And so for Georgia, for example, you have to have lived in the county, you have to petition the Superior Court for your adult legal name change or non-adult, and you have to have resided in that county for 6 months. And so in order for a court to have jurisdiction over you, you have to live there, so that's a personal jurisdiction over you as a person. And so that's part of the reason that you have to do it in the state of Georgia if you live here. Good question.
Any others?
Yes.
You said you had to petition the Georgia records to have those changes within a certain time limit, but to go to SSA first. Do you get the information back from SSA first? I mean, in time to meet that deadline?
Yes, they're usually pretty quick about it, and there's actually local offices, and now that sort of we're past some of the COVID stuff, a lot of them you can actually go in person and get it done a lot faster. And that's my recommendation, is to go into the local office of the Social Security Administration and get it done. Particularly here in Atlanta, it's much faster. It can be weeks faster by going in person. And if you happen to have forgot to bring certain paperwork, they're going to tell you right then and there, and you could probably go fix it or get whatever else you needed to obviate whatever you might have been missing from your forms. So my suggestion is, if you're going to go to the SSN, to go to the actual office, go in person.
And then my other question is, when I deal with people that had this done a long time ago when they couldn't get the name change easily or the birthmarker change.
Sure.
So if you have to go back and get an updated order, even though you were denied like 10 years ago to do that, if you no longer live in that county, I know you still have to go back to that county, will the county still reissue that order, or how would you do that if you lived, specifically I'm thinking of somebody who lived in Douglas County and they couldn't meet that deadline to get the state never, they changed the name, but they didn't, is difficult. They wouldn't issue a new birth certificate, although the license, Georgia license, everything, but they wouldn't issue a new birth certificate. So to get another order updating to go back to them again, now that maybe it's easier, but they live in Cobb County, so would you go back to Douglas even though you're no longer a resident of Douglas?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I will tell you, my gut says that you probably have to petition the county in which you reside, because in order for the court to have jurisdiction to do that, you have to have lived there for 6 months.
Okay.
But my business card is on the table. Grab it, and I'll find out the answer for you, and I'll tell you. I'm happy to close the loop on that. I don't know. I've never dealt with that. So thank you for stumping me.
I think, was there a question over here?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna, have you ever had a consular birth abroad? My kids have birth certificates through.
I've not.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know one of
Thought about it.
the attorneys in our Southern Regional Office has done that. So my card is also on the table, and I'll get him to answer, and I'll send it to you, because I know he's done that, but I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
No, it's sort of just, I'd never thought about it.
That's a good question. I think we go to the next slide.
All right.
Okay, so changes for naturalized citizens. So if you're changing your name, again, you still have to have a court order for the name change or other legal proof. If you're changing your gender marker, a driver's license, birth certificate, passport, court order, and other official government issued documents reflecting the requested information. Let's just talk more generally about name changes, though. So I said this before, you can petition a superior court if you've lived in that county for 6 months to do an adult. I've only done adult, I've never done children, so I'll caveat this. There's slightly different rules for children. To petition to change your legal name. What you have to do is you have to file a verified petition. All that means is that the information that I'm including in this petition, I'm taking an oath that the information is accurate, is correct. There are lots of samples, and actually, I think you mentioned that this law library has samples that you can get from them. So you need a verified petition. You also need a notice, and what that notice does is it's given to a legal organ, which is just a fancy way of saying a newspaper. Kim's holding one. Yeah, thank you.
I believe in
It's not like a
Cobb.
full-page ad or anything.
Yeah, and so this is what it looks like. It'll just have like the case name, and then it'll have information about this person's petition to change their name from X to Y, and here's where they did that. Every county has their own legal organ, and you can look them up online. And typically the clerk's office for whatever county you're in, if you call them, they'll tell you. They're very familiar with this process. So you need a notice, a verified petition, and I typically include a proposed order. Judges are actually required in the state of Georgia to have a hearing to change your name. I will tell you, they don't always do them. Particularly during COVID, a lot of counties were allowing you to file a motion for judgment on the pleadings. It's just a fancy way of saying everything I've said in there is true, enter an order because I'm right. Some judges have been able to do that. This is sort of off the record, even though we're recording. I will tell you that it's pretty difficult for someone to challenge that, right? Like, who's going to challenge an order without a hearing? Belts and suspenders, the rules in Georgia do say that you're supposed to have a hearing. When you do go to the hearing, judges do them different ways. So sometimes the judge will ask the petitioner, the person asking to have their name changed, questions themselves. Sometimes if you have a lawyer, they'll let the lawyer ask the questions. They will ask you some pretty basic things. Are you above 18 years old? Have you lived in this county for 6 months? Can you confirm that you're not changing your name for some illicit, wrong purpose as to commit fraud or to get around the government authorities or to hide from a debt? And I typically ask, are you changing this name to reflect your personal and professional identity? Just so that they have a reason. Some folks, for example, a lot of times people who live in different countries will come here and they'll change their name to a more American style name, and so that might be a reason to change your name. So that's another question they'll ask, and then you just ask the court to certify an order. I typically give them a proposed order. I suggest to anyone that I help do this that they get 4 or 5 certified copies of the order petitioning for their name change. They're usually like $1 or so a page, depending on the clerk's office. And what you'll do is you'll go down to the clerk's office with the order. They will print 5 copies of them and they will seal them. They will like actually embed a seal so that when you go to the Social Security Administration or to the driver's license, or you go to any of the places, the other agencies to get your name changed, you have a certified copy of your order changing your name. Same for Office of Vital Records. I typically include in my proposed order not only that the name is changed, but that the Office of Vital and Records is instructed to change their name. If you are petitioning to have your gender changed, you need to include as an exhibit to your petition the physician's letter, the letter from your physician saying, hey, this person had surgery on this date, this is their date of birth, this is other identifying information about them. That has to be included in the petition. Yes?
I went recently, and just to add to that, the judge was asking everyone if they had any outstanding warrants.
Interesting.
So, just here in Cobb.
Interesting, yeah, I haven't seen that question, but to your point, every judge does it slightly differently. A lot of times, it's sometimes helpful to have a lawyer, particularly in Cobb County, because the judges are elected in the state of Georgia, and so they will put cases that have attorneys representing them to the front of the line because they want to make all the lawyers happy. So just note that that might be a way to sort of fast track it. It can be a little awkward, I think, for folks to go in the courtroom and to sit in the stand and be asked those questions. I will tell you that particularly with some senior judges, sometimes they fumble with words and with gender expression, and I will just tell you to try to work through those. It happens a lot. Sometimes that's why it's helpful to have a lawyer, because I do try to, particularly with the clients that I help, and by the way, I do all these name changes pro bono. So if you are looking for someone to help do these services and I have availability to do that, I'm happy to help or to refer you out to someone, and Lambda does the same. Just to sort of walk through the process of getting your name changed in the courtroom. It's weird. I'm in court all the time. I feel pretty comfortable there. Other folks who don't happen to do their job in a courtroom, it might feel a little weird. But great questions. Anything else?
And we've got...
So we've been talking a little bit about this. So here's what happens to you. And this is one point that I missed about petitioning. When you get this notice put into your legal organ, it has to run for 4 consecutive weeks. And you have to wait at least 30 days before you have your hearing or you get an order from the court asking that your name be changed. That way it gives creditors, all the other people, time to come object. They'll file an objection. The fact that you are trans or that you are changing your name, as long as it is not for some illicit purpose, a court cannot deny. They shall change your name. And if a court denies you for some weird reason, please call me. I would love to take that lawsuit. I would love to take that on. I've never had any issues, and I think sometimes, right, it helps to have a lawyer there because judges know that we know the rules. But I've never seen it happen in the last couple of years. But there's already a case that I can give to you. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'm happy to help navigate that or refer you to someone that can help navigate that if you happen to petition and a judge denies it. They can deny it if you didn't meet procedural requirements, if you didn't put it into the organ, you didn't verify, you didn't file your correct notice. Those are reasons to deny your petition. So you have to make sure you're checking all the boxes to get everything done correctly. I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss anything on name changes. Oh, small point. It's typically around $300, give or take, to get your name, to file the paperwork with the court to get your name changed. If you cannot afford that, you can file what's called a pauper's affidavit. It's a request that the court waive those fees because you don't have certain income measures to pay the filing fees. Those are, I don't know if that's part of your packet. It is.
We have those as a separate
Great.
packet.
And so it's something that you can include with your petition, and if it's granted, the court will waive those filing fees. There also is a fee to put it in the newspaper. The legal organ will charge you, I think it's usually around $150. It depends on the organ. They charge, like, some charge per word, some charge per line, some, I don't know what it is in Cobb.
It's $80
Okay.
in Cobb.
Okay, perfect. I'll admit that my paralegal helps do it usually, so I don't know what the cost is, but there is going to be a cost for putting in a legal organ, and the pauper's affidavit will not waive that fee. So that is something that you will have to pay for. Cost, and make sure I didn't miss. Oh, some courts, and I don't know about Cobb off the top of my head, require what's called a case initiation form. It's a cover document that we typically file in a civil or criminal lawsuit that explains kind of the nature of the dispute. Some courts will require it. You should talk to the clerk of court. They'll tell you, hey, yes, you have to fill out this case initiation form. I don't remember, and I should know this, whether Cobb requires
Cobb's
it.
got two that they require.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's something it's just a cover document that it's more for internal workings than anything, but it's a paperwork that will need to be that needs to be filled out when you go to petition the court. I think I covered most of those. Okay, yeah.
And the link at the very bottom is to the Georgia Name Kit, a name change kit, which was a partnership with Lambda and a couple other organizations to gather a step-by-step guide. So everything that Andrew has just said is in that document as well. And some of the forms are also linked there so you can see what they look like before visiting the county clerk's office to actually receive them, get them notarized, and all those things.
I mentioned going in person to the Social Security Administration, same for the birth certificate, Office of Vitals and Records. They take a very long time, sometimes 3 months. If you go in person, you can sometimes get it same day. So I would go in person to do your birth certificate as well. It's much faster. Yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's kind of not about this, but I was signed in to be the Army and then put out for being gay.
Okay.
Before I even got basic training.
Interesting.
Because I was going to be a cryptolinguist and needed the, what do you call it, the security clearance. So now they've said we can get medical care from VA if we were thrown out for being gay. So do you know anything about that?
I don't, but Danny, you might be a good resource. I don't personally do that, but I know that that Lambda in particular has helped a lot with benefits as it relates to military folks. So
I can't think of, I'm trying to remember the specifics at this time. I know that I just supported a veteran who was it was considered dishonorable discharge for his HIV status, and so getting that overturned and expunged from his record, we just finished that. So I know we are currently supporting our veterans who are LGBTQ or HIV/AIDS impacted to, one, get that removed from their records, and two, to receive VA benefits. So I know it is happening, but I can give you the specific process after.
yeah, I think
today.
Danny's contact was on the card there, so you can maybe find one of the referral attorneys to help.
I think I will. Yes, that's why we have you all. Wonderful.
Any more questions about name changes, gender affirming changes, birth certificates, passports? Yeah.
A little more about the gender affirming.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the language that you've used so far has been centered around surgery.
Yeah.
And I know for a lot of non-binary and trans folks, surgery is not always the end goal.
Yep.
But I'm getting the idea that for legal purposes, there is some sort of surgical process that needs to happen.
For Georgia-specific
For Georgia.
documents, yes. That is not true for federal government. So part of that letter that you can use to get your passport or other federal documents changed, the physician's letter does not need to say, you do not have to have surgery. Your gender affirmation has to be complete, right, is the word. So, and that word's important, and I'll tell you why. It's particularly for passports. To get a 10-year passport, your gender transition has to be complete. If it is in progress, your passport is only valid for 2 years.
Okay.
And then you have to go back after the end of the 2-year period and then say it's complete, and then you can get the 10-year passport. So when your physician's writing the letter, important word to use, complete. That's a good question. Yeah, Georgia, unfortunately, and talk to your politicians about this, it's something that needs to be changed in order for, you have to complete that surgery in order to have your gender marker changed on Georgia documents.
Okay.
And often we do find that what that surgery is, there can be some room there, what the medical intervention was, but there does have to be documentation that there has been a medical intervention.
Yeah, it's not, I think I mentioned this earlier too, there's no like, these are the approved surgeries that you must complete in order to have your gender marker changed. It just says you had to have completed a gender affirming surgery. I think there's an actual term or phrase. It's appropriate clinical treatment for gender transition.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we had a client that did like the Adam's apple.
Interesting.
What did
Tracheotomy?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
But I mean, that was gender affirming surgery.
That's what I was just thinking. I was looking at like kind of the cosmetics kind of stuff could potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean.
No,
this
please.
is
I
great.
think a lot of it is like just between you and your medical professional, what
Yeah.
like, they're comfortable saying.
Okay.
Because it doesn't have to necessarily be what.
Right. No, that's a great point. And they left it ambiguous, so there's room for interpretation. That's a lawyer. That's what we get paid to do. Well, I've left my business cards on the table. I mean this. I'm happy to help be a resource for folks that are looking to go through this process to get name changes or gender affirmation changes done. If I can't do them, I can hopefully find someone that can help you do them. Yeah, they're spread out throughout. I will give one final plug to Lambda just because I'm someone who volunteers with them. They're doing fantastic work for folks in the trans and HIV space. They have been sort of tantamount in leading the charge for litigation that affects queer people. If you think back to like Lawrence versus Texas, just like sodomy laws, and sort of the progeny of cases that affect queer people, which I'll tell you as someone who watches the law, and it can be very bothersome when you look at what's going on in the Supreme Court as it relates to Roe versus Wade and Plessy versus Ferguson, or sorry, for Casey versus Planned Parenthood. Those cases rely on the principles that come from Lawrence versus Texas, Loving, which allows folks who are of different races to be married, Obergefell, which allows same-sex couples to get married. All of those individual privacy cases are the bedrock and have been built upon Casey versus Planned Parenthood and Roe versus Wade. And so the work that Lambda is doing is super important because those principles are going to likely be under attack. And so if you can volunteer your time, your efforts, and your space or your money to help support their work, I would encourage you to do so. My firm does. I personally do. I think they do fantastic work. And I really appreciate you all giving me the space to talk to you guys about Lambda and about name changes. And so thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I didn't pay him to do that. But Andrew is absolutely an asset to our organization and someone we definitely, as you can see, is a wealth of knowledge. I have a few more things here. So talking about citizenship and marriage, a question that I've gotten a little bit as one of the regional coordinators. So when you call the help desk for Georgia, it comes to me first. So something I've supported folks through is sponsoring a spouse who is not an American citizen. So for binational couples, this is the one that I help with the most. If both partners are located in the United States versus the foreign spouse is located outside of the United States, or if the two partners are not currently married, there is slightly different processes between the three situations. If both members of the relationship are non-U.S. citizens, there's even a different process for that. But Immigration Equality, I have partnered with a couple of their attorneys. they have a very comprehensive resource on what forms you need, how to make sure that you are filling them out in such a way that you are as likely as possible to get all of that approved. Especially under the current administration, we have some very favorable conditions to see spousal sponsorships. There we go. Getting those approved, we've had some really good success with that, as well as getting consular processing done and getting adjustments of status. Andrew mentioned affidavits, or kind of just saying, I promise all of this is true, and we're seeing those affidavits are going through pretty smoothly in terms of people being able to say that I have been with my partner for X amount of time. They live in the UK, I live in the United States. I would like to sponsor them to be able to receive an American visa and then become a permanent resident and continue through that process. So we are seeing that for same-sex couples, it was very, very difficult up until I would say about 2019. Right before COVID, we were able to help a lot of folks who had been waiting for a very long time to sponsor their spouse. And this administration has been very favorable to same-sex couples with that. We had a question about children. And as Andrew pointed out, Obergefell is definitely the bedrock of a lot of the things that we've been able to litigate over the last few years. And per that, same-sex couples cannot be denied the ability to adopt as long as they meet their state's requirements. Georgia's requirements, at least 25. You have to be at least 10 years older than the child you are fostering or setting out to adopt. Bona fide resident of the state, and then financially, physically, and mentally able to have permanent custody of a child. All of these requirements are pretty standard across at least the South, my region of focus. But should you ever have an issue, whether it's with previous slide around citizenship, around your marriage being recognized, or around the legal custody of your children, Lambda Legal is absolutely here to make sure that if you follow the letter of the law, there should be no issue. So it's important to, where you can, have someone who has that knowledge base, or know it yourself so you can quote, here's exactly how I've met those requirements. Second parent adoption or step-parent adoptions are sometimes a necessary part of an adoption or child rearing process for same-sex couples, just in that you want to make sure that regardless of what happens, perhaps with Roe v. Wade or for Obergefell, that you still have legal custody and parental rights to your children. For in vitro or surrogacy child situations, we do find that step-parent adoptions also help, which it can be a little disheartening that step-parent has to be the title for someone who has always been that child's birth parent, and we recognize the language that has there. Second parent, as it's slightly different, a slightly different process than step-parent. Second parent puts the name on the birth certificate as it is. So mother and mother, father and father, or removing one name that perhaps was assumed to be the parental name, and it can be changed. If a parent has had a name change, we can also update the birth certificate through the second parent legal rights. Step parent, though, it can have the title will say step parent on a birth certificate, or a new one will be issued and say amended. But second parent, it's the cleanest copy, so to speak, and that no one is birth versus step. Both are listed as birth parents. In talking to the attorneys in the Southern Regional Office, as well as some of our help desk attorneys, Georgia, it varies by county and can be unclear if a county issues second parent, step parent, or just step parent. So that might be a case-by-case basis, and of course, I'm not an attorney, I just play well with them, so I always encourage you to reach out to legal counsel on if second parent adoption is available in your county. But if you can pursue some kind of legal rights around your children, if you are a same-sex couple, we do recommend it, yes.
Are you guys involved in or following the, oh my God, I just had a brain fart. I'm sorry,
No worries.
the new statute with relative.
Equitable caregiver.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
yes.
equitable caregiver statute.
Yes, we are. I don't know the details of it off the top of my head, but I do know that we have an attorney whose focus is youth and family care, and I know that she's working on that those cases in particular.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Could I just comment on that?
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of adoptions, that would put both of the parents on equal footing should they ever have an unfortunate breakup and both of them want to seek parenting time, custody, etc. But if they're forced to go the equitable caregiver route, then they're going to have to go to court and prove by clear and convincing evidence that they should have a role in the child or children's lives, which is a very high evidentiary burden to have to accomplish. So in many instances, adoptions make a lot of sense and are superior to equitable caregiver actions in many regards.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Also, I do believe Georgia has step-parent rights, where if you do divorce from a step-parent, the step-parent can still petition for rights.
Under the equitable caregiver statute.
But like, say currently as well, I believe they have something I remember from years ago. But that might be something to think about as well.
Absolutely.
There's a couple of cases up, I
Friend
think,
of mine from years
making
ago
it
told
to
me
the
about it.
Supreme Court on the equitable caregiver. So I'll be real, I was curious if you guys know, because, I'm curious to see how those are gonna pan out.
Yes, from what I recall, we aren't sure exactly what the language will look like and how states individually will interpret those things. So I think for Georgia specifically, I'm not positive.
I'm unfortunately not a family law lawyer. Sorry, guys, I don't know.
Any other? Yes.
Will any of that apply to just caring for older parents, like for people who are adults and don't have any children, just caring for older?
I am not positive if it applies to caretakers across the board. I don't want to misspeak in answering that.
You're talking about the equitable caregiver?
Yeah.
I think it specifies children.
Okay.
You
I
have to-
thought so, but I didn't want to
Parental role.
promise that as gospel. Then the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, so it's actually childwelfare.org, details the differences between the different forms of adoption, exactly how same-sex couples are protected in parenthood, as well as the great point that was made that there is a higher, there can be a higher burden for a step-parent to assume legal rights or custody if that's the form of adoption that's occurred. Something that Lambda Legal has recently litigated on, and we are working to reach out to as many people as possible that may have been impacted. Those who were in committed relationships before same-sex marriage was legalized, before they had the ability to have their marriage recognized as legal where they lived, are entitled in many cases to Social Security survivorship benefits that they have not ever received. So we are trying to make sure that it is absolutely law of the land that all qualified surviving spouses may receive survivorship benefits in the unfortunate event that their spouse does pass away. However, those that did not receive what they were owed and have been paying into, often for decades, there are two cases that we litigated, and so two groups that someone could find themselves in. Whether they were married, or they would have been married for 9 months if marriage had been legalized at the time, before their partner's death. They were never able to receive marriage benefits because of discriminatory laws. That is one law and one scenario where someone could qualify. they did get married, but were not able to be married for 9 months before the partner passed away. And so, but they were still obviously and have the evidence to show they were in a committed relationship previously. There could be potential for back pay there as well. What we have found so far in supporting those who are trying to work with the Social Security Administration on this is, yes, they are very slow. And there's not a resistance, but there's a lot of, this is a lot of paperwork, this takes a lot of time. I've never had to do this before. And in terms of, these two cases were settled September of last year, so very new occurrences. But if either of these two situations, you know anyone that may fall into these two things, please have them contact us, because we want to make sure that as many people as possible who fall into these categories are receiving the benefits that they are owed. But Social Security benefits are something that we are hopefully afforded as we get older, and so we want to make sure those who are entitled do receive them. Any questions about that, I will answer as best as I can. All right. And I think we do have time for questions, but I wanted to make sure we had the contact slide up here. These were only a few topics, I know. As I said, Lambda Legal is happy to help in any situation where you feel like legal counsel or, of course, actual legal representation may need to be obtained. We have our help desk number here. State-by-state guideline. That link will take you directly to Georgia's page. You can email me directly. My card is on the table. If you were to call the help desk number, you would also be getting me, so it's all Danny all the time. And then we do have social media presences that I monitor as well, so if you, in the moment, it's easier to send me a Facebook message, you are also welcome to do that, or a direct message on Instagram or Twitter. I will also answer that way and make sure that I connect you to a help desk attorney and any other legal representation from our cooperating attorneys. All right.
Thanks, Danny. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Any other questions? Anything else before we close?